They're yours now. Those were the first words my daughter said as she folded her arms across her chest and looked at the 3 black trash bags sitting beside the cracked sidewalk. The bags held 71 years of my life. Not furniture. Not the walls I had painted 6 different times. Not the porch swing I built from cedar wood during the summer of 1998. Just my clothes, a pair of worn work boots, my shaving kit, 2 photo albums, and a coffee mug with a faded blue handle that my late wife had bought me during a county fair almost 30 years earlier. She didn't even look embarrassed. "I've already changed the locks," she added, as if she were reminding me to buy milk on the way home. "It's easier this way." Home. She still called it home. The same house I had spent 14 years building one paycheck at a time. I stared at the front porch. Every board. Every window frame. Every brick. I knew them better than I knew the lines on my own hands. My name is Thomas Walker. I'm 71 years old. For 43 years I believed that if you quietly sacrificed enough, the people you loved would eventually understand what those sacrifices cost. I was wrong. But this story does not start here. Welcome back to Revenge Cold Stories. Drop your first name and your city in the comments and subscribe before we go any further. The truth begins more than 50 years earlier, when I was 19 years old with exactly $48 in my checking account, a rusted pickup truck that stalled whenever it rained, and hands already covered with calluses. My father had been a carpenter. Not a famous one. Not a wealthy one. Just the kind of man who believed a person's character could be measured by whether they left a job cleaner than they found it. He never hugged me. He rarely complimented me. But one evening, after we finished framing a small farmhouse outside town, he handed me a hammer with a smooth hickory handle. "It'll outlive both of us if you respect it." I still have that hammer. Or at least I thought I did. Construction became my life. By 25, I was supervising crews of 12 workers. By 32, I had earned my contractor's license. At 35, I started Walker Custom Homes. We weren't a huge company. Our biggest year was 38 completed homes. Our smallest was 11. Over 30 years, we built 286 houses across 3 counties. People remembered our work because we never rushed foundations. I always told my crew the same thing. If the foundation is honest, the house forgives your mistakes. Funny enough, families don't. I met my wife Margaret when I was 26. She worked as the evening librarian. She laughed with her whole face. Whenever she smiled, tiny wrinkles appeared beside her eyes long before age should have put them there. She claimed they came from reading too much. I knew they came from kindness. We married 14 months later. Our honeymoon lasted only 4 days because I couldn't afford a week away from work. She never complained. Instead, she helped me balance invoices every Friday night while eating grilled cheese sandwiches because neither of us wanted to spend money eating out. When our daughter Emily was born, Margaret cried longer than the baby did. 3 years later, our son Daniel arrived. For a while, life felt complete. Busy, messy, beautiful. The house everyone later fought over began as an empty 2-acre lot outside town. The bank rejected my first loan application. Then the second. Finally, a local credit union approved a modest construction loan after I agreed to work as both contractor and laborer. That saved almost $180,000. Every Saturday, friends came over to help. Every Sunday, Margaret packed sandwiches for everyone. Emily loved carrying tiny nails in a plastic bucket. Daniel mostly played in the dirt. Neither child remembered those weekends. I remembered every single one. The kitchen ceiling still had one beam with a tiny pencil mark where Emily, at age 6, insisted she had helped Daddy. I never sanded it away. Margaret told me to leave it forever. One day she'll point at it with her children. She never got the chance. Cancer arrived when Margaret was 58. Stage 4. The doctor tried speaking gently. There are some words no gentle voice can soften. She lived another 19 months. During those 19 months, she apologized constantly. I'm sorry you're cooking. I'm sorry you're driving me everywhere. I'm sorry you have to watch this. I kept telling her the truth. You've carried me for 33 years, let me carry you now. She passed away on an October morning before sunrise. The house became unbearably quiet. Silence has weight. Nobody tells you that. After her funeral, Emily started visiting more often. She brought groceries. Daniel mowed the lawns. Neighbors told me how lucky I was. Your children really care. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Little things changed slowly. Emily suggested putting her name on one checking account. It'll make emergencies easier. Made sense. Daniel offered to handle property taxes online. Made sense. Emily insisted I shouldn't climb ladders anymore. Also made sense. Good intentions and control often wear the same clothes. You don't notice the difference until much later. I was 70 when my knees finally admitted they couldn't do roofing anymore. So I retired. Officially. Walker Custom Homes closed after completing its last project. My final year's revenue had been just over $1 million. After expenses, taxes, insurance, payroll, and retirement contributions, I walked away with less than most people imagined. Construction isn't glamorous. It's honest. I had enough. No mansions. No luxury cars. Just savings, the paid-off house, and peace. Or so I thought. Emily began referring to the place differently. My house needs new curtains. Our kitchen should be remodeled. We're thinking about opening up this wall. Every time she said my house, something inside me tightened. I ignored it. Daniel had recently lost his job at a logistics company after 16 years. His marriage was struggling. Money was tight. Emily kept saying the same sentence. Dad, family shares. She wasn't wrong. Family should share. But sharing isn't the same as surrendering. One Thanksgiving, I overheard something they thought I couldn't hear. Emily stood in the dining room speaking softly to Daniel. I don't know why he still acts like it's all his. Daniel sighed. Just give it time. He'll leave everything to us anyway. I stood frozen in the hallway holding a pumpkin pie. Neither of them noticed me. It wasn't greed in their voices. It was certainty. That somehow hurt even more. Over the next year, decisions happened without asking me. Furniture disappeared. Paint colors changed. Margaret's sewing room became a home office. Her favorite rocking chair ended up in the garage because it didn't match the decor. Every object removed felt like another conversation, with my wife being erased. Whenever I objected, Emily smiled patiently. Dad, you're resisting change. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was resisting forgetting. The final argument wasn't dramatic. That's what people misunderstand. Families rarely break apart because of one explosive moment. Most fractures happen through hundreds of tiny dismissals. One Tuesday morning, I made eggs in my own kitchen. Emily walked in carrying renovation brochures. We've decided to convert your bedroom into the master suite. I laughed. She didn't. You can move into the guest room. I like my rooms. It makes more sense this way. For who? For everyone. I looked at her carefully. When did everyone stop, including me? She rolled her eyes. Dad, you're making this emotional. No, I answered quietly. I'm making it personal. Because it always had been. And I still had no idea that Margaret had seen this possibility years before. Nor did I know that somewhere among the belongings stuffed into those trash bags outside the house, a sealed envelope was waiting. One that would force every person standing in that front yard to question everything they believed they owned. The strange thing about betrayal is that it almost never arrives wearing anger. It usually comes wrapped in practicality. 3 days before my daughter put my belongings into trash bags, she sat across from me at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a calculator. "I've made a list," she said. "A list of what? What needs to happen?" She turned the pad toward me. Every line looked organized. Clinical, bedroom renovation, garage conversion, estate paperwork, bank updates, storage unit, medical power of attorney review. At the bottom, written in careful blue ink, were the words, "Dad's relocation." I read the page twice before looking up. Relocation. Emily nodded as though we were discussing the weather. "You shouldn't be living here anymore." I let the silence settle between us. "This is my house." "It was your house." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means we're thinking long term." "We, Daniel and I." She folded her hands. "You've lived here alone since Mom died. It's too much house for one person." "I've managed just fine." "But for how long?" There it was. The question wasn't really about my health. It was about time. How much longer would I remain an obstacle between them and the future they had already imagined? Daniel walked in carrying 2 grocery bags. He sensed the tension immediately. "Everything okay?" Emily answered before I could. "We're just talking." Daniel placed the groceries on the counter. "Dad." He rubbed the back of his neck, the way he always did when he was uncomfortable. "Emily's trying to help." "I didn't ask for help." "You don't always have to ask." "No," I replied softly. "But people usually wait until it's wanted." Nobody raised their voice. Nobody slammed a door. That somehow made it worse. Over the following days, I noticed little things disappearing. The spare key no longer hung beside the pantry. The filing cabinet in my study had been moved. Several folders containing insurance papers had been rearranged. When I asked Emily about it, she smiled. "I'm organizing." "You should have asked first." "I knew you'd say no." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was cruel. Because it revealed a philosophy. Permission had become optional. She genuinely believed that if her intentions were good, my consent no longer mattered. I wish I could tell you I confronted her immediately. I didn't. Grief changes people. Loneliness changes them even more. After Margaret died, I became quieter. Less willing to argue. I confused keeping peace with preserving love. They're not the same thing. A week later, I drove to Oak Ridge Cemetery with fresh white lilies. Margaret had loved lilies. Not expensive arrangements. Just simple white flowers. I cleaned the fallen leaves from around her headstone and sat beside her for almost an hour. "I think I'm losing the house," I whispered. Saying it aloud made it real. The wind carried the smell of freshly cut grass. For a ridiculous moment, I almost expected her to answer. Instead, I remembered something she'd once told me while we were painting the living room. "If people stop listening to your words, Thomas." She dipped her brush into the paint tray. "They'll eventually stop seeing you." At the time, I thought she was talking about marriage. Years later, I realized she was talking about dignity. When I returned home, a moving truck sat in the driveway. Not a large one. One of those rental trucks people use for apartments. I frowned. Emily stepped outside. "Oh good, you're back. What is this?" "We're getting started." "Started with what?" "The changes." My stomach tightened. "What changes?" She looked genuinely surprised. "The ones we discussed." I never agreed. "We didn't think you'd actually want to." There was that word again. "We." Daniel appeared behind her. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad, did you know about this? He hesitated. Oh, yes. And you said nothing. He looked at the ground. I thought it'd be easier. Easier for who? Neither of them answered. Workers carried empty boxes toward the front door. One young man smiled politely. Sir, which room is yours? Before I could speak, Emily answered. The back bedroom. Back bedroom. Not Dad's room. Not my room. Just another space to be emptied. I walked past everyone and went inside. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered from breakfast. My boots rested beside the door exactly where Margaret had always insisted we leave them. The hallway photographs were gone. Every single one. The nail holes remained. Tiny empty scars across the wall. I turned toward the living room. Margaret's piano had disappeared. I froze. It had stood in the same corner for 28 years. She played every Sunday evening. Never professionally. Just enough to make the house feel alive. Where is it? Emily answered casually. We donated it. I stared at her. You what? It wasn't being used. I couldn't speak. She misunderstood my silence. The community center was thrilled. You donated. My voice cracked. Your mother's piano. It was taking up space. I looked at Daniel. He finally whispered. I thought they asked you. No, they said. I know what they said. The room became unbearably quiet. That was the first moment I realized something important. Neither of my children believed they were stealing. They believed they were managing. They had rewritten the story in their own minds. I wasn't the owner anymore. I was simply the elderly man still occupying the property. Once people convince themselves of that, almost anything begins to feel reasonable. That evening I sat alone on the porch until sunset. Emily came outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed me one. I know today was hard. I accepted the mug. Then why did you do it? She sighed. You've always been sentimental. I smiled sadly. No, I've always remembered. She looked away. Memories don't pay bills. The bills are already paid. They won't always be. I watched a pair of sparrows land near the bird feeder Margaret had painted years earlier. Emily. She turned toward me. When you were 7, you wanted a treehouse. A faint smile crossed her face. I remember. No, I shook my head gently. You remember playing in it. She frowned. I remember building it. 3 weekends. 43 sheets of lumber. 9 boxes of screws. 6 splinters. 1 broken ladder. Every detail lived inside me because every board represented time I willingly gave. Children remember receiving. Parents remember building. That difference matters more than most families ever realize. Emily stood without speaking. For just a second, I thought I saw regret. Then her phone rang. She answered it immediately and walked back inside. The moment passed. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Or at least, I thought I still lived there. By noon, every piece of clothing I owned had been stuffed into black trash bags. My toolbox. My framed certificates. Margaret's recipe book. Even the old hammer my father had given me 52 years earlier. Everything placed on the sidewalk. As neighbors slowed their cars to stare. Embarrassment wasn't what I felt. It was something quieter. The realization that the house I had built with my own hands no longer recognized the man who had built it. I picked up the first bag. It was heavier than the others. The plastic had split slightly near the bottom. As I bent down to lift it, I noticed a small manila envelope tucked inside an old flannel jacket. There was no stamp, no address, only 3 words written in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting. For Thomas only. My hands began to tremble. I hadn't seen that handwriting in almost 4 years. I slowly opened the envelope, completely unaware that what I was about to read would change not only my future, but the future my children had already claimed for themselves. My fingers refused to cooperate. Age had made my hands slower, but this wasn't age. This was fear. The paper inside the envelope had been folded into thirds. The edges had yellowed slightly, and there was a faint lavender scent that instantly carried me back 20 years. Margaret used to keep dried lavender sachets in every dresser drawer because she said a house should smell calm before anyone even spoke. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I unfolded the letter. The first line blurred because tears filled my eyes before I could finish reading it. My dearest Thomas, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer sitting across the breakfast table pretending your coffee isn't too strong. It also means something happened that I prayed never would. I stopped breathing. She knew. Not every detail. But somehow, she had known enough to prepare for this moment. I continued reading. You've spent your entire life believing that love means giving until there's nothing left. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with you. It's also the reason I'm writing this letter before I leave this world. Cars continued driving past the house. Neighbors glanced in my direction. I didn't notice any of them anymore. The entire world had narrowed to Margaret's handwriting. You always assumed our children would understand the difference between receiving a home and earning one. I hope they do, but hope is not a plan. And I have learned that people often confuse gratitude with entitlement, without even realizing it. A tear landed on the paper. I quickly wiped it away, terrified of smudging her words. If our children are reading this with you, stop here. This letter is meant for you alone until you decide otherwise. I instinctively looked toward the front porch. Emily stood near the doorway with her arms folded. Daniel was beside her. Neither of them could see what was written. Emily called out, "What is it?" I folded the page halfway closed. "Nothing." She frowned. "What letter?" "Something your mother left me." Her expression changed. For just a second. Not sadness. Curiosity. Then concern. "Can I see it?" "No. It's probably family related." "It says it's for me." Emily exchanged a quick glance with Daniel. I noticed it immediately. They weren't looking at each other because they missed their mother. They were wondering whether the letter contained something important. That realization hurt more than I expected. I lowered my eyes back to the page. "Thomas, there are conversations we never had because I didn't want to believe we'd need them. During my treatment, I noticed little things, not cruelty, not hatred, just assumptions. Emily talked about renovations before asking you. Daniel spoke about when the house is ours as though the future had already happened. They are not bad people, they are impatient people. Those are very different things." I swallowed hard. Those words described our children perfectly. Margaret had never judged quickly. She always searched for the reason behind people's actions. Even now, even in a farewell letter, she wasn't condemning them. She was trying to understand them. The next paragraph made my heart pound. Several months before I died, I met with attorney Benjamin Collins without telling anyone except our neighbor, Ruth. I wanted someone outside the family to know what I had done in case you ever needed help finding the documents. Attorney D. Benjamin removed his glasses and placed them carefully on the table. In 35 years of building homes, I had learned to watch people's hands. Hands often revealed what words tried to hide. His were steady, calm. Whatever he was about to tell me wasn't a surprise to him. It was simply the truth. "Thomas," he said quietly, "before Margaret signed these documents, she asked me one question." I leaned forward. "What was it?" If my husband is ever forced out of his own home while he's still alive, what is the fastest legal way to restore his rights without humiliating our children? I closed my eyes. Even then, she had been thinking about protecting them. Not just me. Benjamin continued. I gave her several options. And she rejected the ones that would immediately punish Emily and Daniel. That sounded exactly like Margaret. She never believed justice required cruelty. Benjamin opened another folder. Instead, she chose something much more difficult. What? Accountability. He slid a document across the table. At the top were both our names. Thomas Walker. Margaret Walker. The date. 4 years earlier. Margaret transferred the property into a protected family trust. I frowned. A trust? Yes. I don't understand. You remained the lifetime beneficiary. In plain English. Benjamin smiled gently. It means that house is legally your home for the rest of your life. I let out a slow breath. No one can remove you. No. No one can force you to move. No. No one can renovate, sell, refinance, or transfer the property without your written approval. I stared at him. They changed the locks. I know. They packed my belongings. I know. They believed they already controlled the property. Benjamin nodded. They believed wrong. Silence filled the room. Not victorious. Just quiet. I thought about Emily. About Daniel. Neither of them had ever asked an attorney. Neither had ever looked at the paperwork. They had simply assumed. Assumptions had built this disaster. Benjamin reached for another page. There's more. I almost laughed. There always seems to be. He smiled. Margaret knew you'd say that. He handed me a handwritten memorandum. This isn't legally binding. What is it? Instructions. For you. For me. I looked at the familiar handwriting. Benjamin spoke before I began reading. She asked that I remind you of something before making any decision. What? Thomas has spent his whole life fixing buildings. Please don't let him spend the rest of his life trying to fix people who aren't ready to help themselves. My throat tightened. She knew me better than anyone ever could. I would have walked back into that house that very afternoon if Emily had apologized. Not because everything would be solved. Because forgiveness came naturally to me. Margaret knew that. She also knew forgiveness without change becomes permission. Benjamin folded his hands. I've practiced law for 38 years. I looked up. I've seen siblings sue each other. Children abandon parents. Parents disinherit children. Families destroy one another over far less than a house. He paused. Your wife asked me to prevent that if possible. Can it still be prevented? I believe so. How? By giving everyone the truth before anyone receives consequences. I nodded slowly. That sounded fair. Very fair. He opened his calendar. I'd like to invite Emily and Daniel here. Today. If they'll come. And if they refuse. Then we proceed without them. I thought for several seconds. No. Benjamin waited. I don't want to surprise them. They surprised you. I know. But I don't want to become what hurt me. He gave a small approving nod. I suspected you'd say that too. I smiled faintly. So did Margaret. He chuckled. Yes. For the first time in days I laughed. Only briefly. But it felt good. Benjamin picked up the telephone. I'll call Emily. I raised my hand. Please. He stopped. I'd rather do it myself. 20 minutes later, I stood outside his office with my phone in my hand. Emily answered on the 4th ring. Dad, It's me. I know. There was an awkward silence. Finally she spoke. Where are you? At Benjamin Collins' office. Another pause. Why, your mother asked me to come. Her voice changed immediately. What does that mean? It means I'd like you and Daniel to meet me here. Is this about the house? Yes. She hesitated. We already talked about the house. No, I answered gently. We talked around it. This time we'll talk about it. She was quiet for nearly 10 seconds. Finally, we'll be there. She hung up. Benjamin looked through the office window. They're coming. Yes. He nodded. Good. We had about 40 minutes to wait. During that time we talked. Not about legal documents. About Margaret. He told me how she always arrived 10 minutes early. How she brought homemade cookies for the receptionist every Christmas. How she insisted on reading every page before signing anything. Then he said something that made me smile. Do you know what she was most proud of? The children. Of course. He smiled. But after that, he looked directly at me. She said she was proud that after 40 years of marriage, you'd never once made her feel like the house belonged more to you than to her. I lowered my eyes. I never thought about it that way. She did. He leaned back. She said Thomas built the walls, but every room became a home because we lived there together. My eyes filled again. Outside the conference room window, I saw 2 familiar cars pull into the parking lot. Emily arrived first. Daniel pulled in behind her. Neither smiled. Neither looked angry either. Just anxious. Very anxious. Benjamin stood. They're here. I took one slow breath. For the first time since finding my belongings on the sidewalk. I wasn't walking into an argument. I was walking into the truth. And deep inside, I had the strange feeling that before this meeting ended, my children would finally understand that the greatest thing they had almost thrown away wasn't the house. It was the father who had built it for them. The receptionist opened the conference room door. They're here. I stood instinctively. Then sat back down. Not because I was afraid. Because I didn't want the meeting to begin with emotion. I wanted it to begin with respect. Emily entered first. She wore the same navy blue blouse she'd been wearing the day before. Her face looked tired, she hadn't slept much. Neither had I. Daniel followed a few steps behind. His eyes immediately found mine. Dad. I nodded once. Daniel. He looked as though he wanted to say something more. He didn't. Benjamin waited until everyone had taken a seat before speaking. Thank you for coming. Emily crossed her arms. I assume this is about the house. It is. She looked toward me. Dad, if this is your way of punishing us. I quietly interrupted. I didn't invite you here to punish you. She stopped talking. Benjamin folded his hands on the table. I'd like everyone to understand something before we discuss legal documents. No one spoke. He continued. I met with Margaret Walker several times before her passing. Emily frowned. I didn't know that. No, Benjamin answered gently. You weren't supposed to. Daniel shifted uneasily in his chair. Benjamin continued. Your mother loved both of you deeply. Emily's eyes immediately filled with tears. I know she did. I believe you know that. Benjamin nodded. But she also worried. Worried about what? Benjamin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened Margaret's notebook. He wasn't rushing. He wanted every word to matter. He read aloud. People don't become entitled overnight. It happens one helpful decision at a time until someone forgets whose decision it was supposed to be. The room became silent. Emily looked down at the table. Benjamin turned another page. If Thomas ever starts apologizing for living in his own house, something has gone terribly wrong. I felt my chest tighten. Emily slowly raised her eyes toward me. "I never wanted you to feel that way." I didn't answer. "Not yet." Benjamin closed the notebook. "I don't believe either of you intended to hurt your father." Emily spoke immediately. "We didn't." Daniel nodded. "We honestly thought we were helping." Benjamin leaned forward slightly. "I believe you." Emily looked relieved. Then he continued. "But good intentions never erase harmful actions." Her relief disappeared. "They don't." "No." He spoke kindly. "If they did, every preventable mistake in the world would become acceptable." Nobody argued. Because nobody could. Benjamin slid several documents across the table. "I've reviewed the property's legal status." Emily looked confident. "I already know Dad wanted us to inherit it." Benjamin nodded. "Eventually." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "The house is held in a protected trust." Emily frowned. "A what?" "A legal structure created by your parents." She looked at Daniel. He looked just as confused. Benjamin continued. "Your father has the unrestricted legal right to occupy that home for the rest of his life." Emily's expression slowly changed. "The rest of his..." She stopped. Benjamin nodded. "No one may remove him." Silence. "No one may replace locks without his consent." Silence. "No one may remove his belongings." Silence. "No one may make structural changes." Silence. "No one may act on behalf of the property without his written approval." Emily's face lost its color. "Zai." She looked toward me. "I didn't know." "I know." I answered quietly. "You didn't ask." Those 4 words seemed to weigh more than every legal document on the table. Daniel covered his face with one hand. "Oh my God." Benjamin remained calm. "The law isn't the most important issue today." Emily whispered. "It isn't." "No." He looked directly at her. "The relationship is." She stared at the tabletop. Her voice became almost inaudible. "I packed his clothes." No one answered. "I put them in garbage bags." Still no one answered. "Zai." Her shoulders began to shake. "I actually did that." For the first time since all of this began. She wasn't defending herself. She was seeing herself. "There is a difference." A profound one. Daniel finally spoke. "I should have stopped it." He looked at me. I kept telling myself it wasn't my place. I met his eyes. "It was exactly your place." He nodded slowly. "I know. I just..." His voice cracked. "Didn't want Emily angry with me." Benjamin spoke softly. "Sometimes keeping peace with one person means breaking trust with another." Daniel closed his eyes. "I understand that now." The room remained quiet for almost a full minute. No shouting. No accusations. No dramatic speeches. Just 4 adults sitting with the weight of the truth. Finally, Emily reached into her purse. She placed a small brass key on the table. It slid slowly toward me. "The new key." She couldn't look at me. "I'm sorry." I picked it up. It felt surprisingly heavy. "I changed the locks because..." She wiped her eyes. "I convinced myself you were already moving." She laughed bitterly. "You never actually agreed." "No, I just..." Another tear rolled down her cheek. I kept hearing what I wanted to hear. I thought about Margaret. She had been right. Emily wasn't driven by hatred. She was driven by fear. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of financial instability. Fear of losing control. Fear had simply worn the mask of confidence. Benjamin quietly gathered the documents. "I'll leave the legal decisions to your family." Then he stood. "But before I do." He looked at Emily and Daniel. "I've worked with your parents for many years." Both of them looked up. "Your father never once came into this office asking how to protect himself from his children." He paused. "Your mother did." Neither of them moved. "Not because she stopped loving you." Another pause. "Because she never wanted the day to come when your father would have to defend his right to live in the home he spent 14 years building." Emily covered her mouth. Daniel stared at the floor. I realized something in that moment. The meeting hadn't changed because of legal papers. It had changed because, for the first time, my children had heard the story from someone who had nothing to gain by taking anyone's side. And sometimes, the truth is easiest to hear when it comes from a quiet witness, rather than the person who was hurt. No one moved after Benjamin finished speaking. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was honest. For years, our family had filled uncomfortable moments with explanations, excuses, or changes of subject. This time, no one reached for any of them. Emily was the first to break the silence. "Dad," her voice barely carried across the room. "I don't know how to undo what I did." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I answered with the only truthful response I had. "You can't." A tear slipped down her cheek. I continued before she could mistake my meaning. "But that doesn't mean nothing can be repaired." She nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," I said gently. "I think you're just beginning to." Benjamin quietly excused himself. "I'll give you some privacy." As the door closed behind him, it left only the three of us. For the first time in years. Not as a father managing problems. Not as children making plans. Just three people trying to understand how we had arrived there. Daniel spoke first. "I've replayed yesterday in my head all night." He rubbed his hands together nervously. "I kept seeing those trash bags." His voice cracked. "I should have picked them up." I looked at him. "You should have stopped them from being filled." He nodded. "You're right." I kept telling myself Emily knew what she was doing. He looked toward his sister. That was easier than asking whether it was right. Emily closed her eyes. "I'm sorry, Daniel." He looked surprised. "For what?" "For making it so easy to stay quiet." She took a deep breath. I was so certain I was doing the responsible thing that I treated every disagreement like an obstacle. She turned toward me. "I stopped seeing you as my father." The words hung in the air. "I started seeing you as." She struggled to finish the sentence. "A problem I needed to solve." Those words hurt. But strangely, they also healed something. Because they were finally honest. I nodded once. "Thank you." Emily looked confused. "For what?" "For telling the truth." She lowered her eyes. "I wish it had come sooner." "So do I." Another long silence settled over us. Finally, I reached into my jacket and took out Margaret's notebook. "I want you both to have something." Emily looked uncertain. "The notebook?" "No." I opened it carefully. "There are things in here your mother wrote that belong to all of us." I turned to one of the earliest pages. There was a faded photograph taped beside the entry. Emily, 6 years old, holding a tiny hammer almost as long as her arm. Daniel, 3, sitting inside a wheelbarrow. Me covered in sawdust. Margaret standing behind the camera. On the opposite page she had written, "Today Emily asked who owns the house." Thomas smiled and said, "Nobody owns a home by themselves. Someone builds it. Someone fills it with love. Someone else keeps it alive after we're gone." Emily began crying again. I don't remember that. I do. I smiled faintly. You insisted your bedroom should have purple walls. A tiny laugh escaped her through the tears. I hated purple 6 months later. You certainly did. For just a moment. The room felt familiar again. Not fixed, but familiar. I turned another page. This one contained a list. Not of expenses. Not of building materials. Just 12 short sentences. Margaret had titled it, "Things I Hope Our Children Never Forget." I read them slowly. People are always more valuable than property. Never mistake access for ownership. Gratitude should grow with time, not shrink. If someone sacrifices quietly, don't assume the sacrifice was easy. Ask before deciding for someone else. Being helpful without permission can become control. Listen twice before solving once. When you're frightened, don't confuse speed with wisdom. Apologies matter most after consequences arrive. Leave every relationship better than you found it. Never rush someone's goodbye. Then the final sentence. Love someone enough to let them keep their dignity. No one spoke after I finished. There was nothing left to add. Emily finally whispered, "Mom knew us." I smiled sadly. Better than we knew ourselves. Daniel looked toward the window. What happens now? It was a fair question. The legal answer was simple. The family answer wasn't. I folded the notebook closed. Today, I said quietly, "I'm going home." Emily immediately shook her head. No. I looked at her. I mean. She corrected herself quickly. I mean yes. Of course. It's your home. She took a slow breath. Daniel and I will leave. I watched both of them carefully. Neither argued. Neither negotiated. Neither asked for another chance. For the first time since all of this began. They weren't trying to manage the outcome. They were accepting it. I nodded. I think that's best. Emily wiped her eyes. I'll have the locks changed back today. You don't have to. She looked surprised. I don't. I have the key. I held up the brass key she'd returned. But changing the locks isn't the important part. What is? I looked directly at her. Changing how we treat each other. She quietly nodded. I don't expect you to trust me again overnight. I won't. She accepted that without complaint. But, I continued, trust grows the same way this house did. She frowned slightly. How? One board at a time. A faint smile appeared through her tears. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her in days. As we stood to leave Benjamin's office, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. The greatest inheritance Margaret had left behind wasn't a trust. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't even the house. It was the opportunity to tell the truth before resentment became permanent. And that gift was worth far more than any property deed ever could. Benjamin walked us to the front entrance. Before we stepped outside, he reached into his briefcase and handed me a thin folder. Thomas. I accepted it. What's this? A complete copy of the trust documents, the property records, and Margaret's written instructions. I nodded. Thank you. He hesitated for a moment. There's one instruction I haven't mentioned. I looked at him. Why not? Because she didn't want me to read it unless today's meeting ended peacefully. Emily and Daniel exchanged a quick glance. Benjamin smiled softly. I think she'd be pleased with how today unfolded. He opened the folder and removed a single handwritten page. It's addressed to all three of you. He handed it to me. I believe you should read it together. We didn't read it in the parking lot. Instead, we drove back to the house. My house. The words felt different now. Not because I had won something. Because I had stopped doubting that I belonged there. When we arrived, the black trash bags were still sitting near the sidewalk. No one spoke. Daniel walked toward them first. Without